Amen. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. Thanks for sharing the good news. And let me put my slides up, and we're actually going to have a little family talk again, kind of continuing with some of the things that Joanne shared last week. And these are just things for us to know, to be aware of, to be praying about in our family, our needs. One of the things I love here in Metros, we have very just kind of transparent on the table. We talk about anything and everything that we need to talk about. And of course, last week we had a budget presentation that revealed that we definitely have some needs financially that we all need to be praying about. And Joanna just did a fantastic job with that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some ideas. She had said that we're going to be sharing some ideas of possible solutions of things we can do. But first, I just want to say thank you to Joanna. What a great job you did with that presentation. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that we have of just to help ourselves financially. But I want to read this parable first in Luke 16 that is really it's a very remarkable parable, and probably not a lot of probably haven't heard many sermons on it because it's such a interesting parable, but it's apropos for what we're talking about tonight. So in Luke 16, it's the parable of the shrewd manager. It says, Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master's taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. This is a really interesting parable because it almost seems like the guy's lying and gets rewarded for it, right? And it's like, wait a second, shouldn't the guy be punished? I mean, he changed the contracts, he lied about it. But that's obviously not what Jesus is highlighting. What he's highlighting is how shrewd he was to take care of himself, right? And you know, it's one of those parables that could be easily misunderstood or easily even preached the wrong way. But so we stick to the most basic understanding is to be shrewd about dealing with money and finances. Be creative and courageous in meeting needs and making sure that we're taken care of. That's why this guy was held up, is that he figured out a way to make sure his needs were being met. And so it's really in that spirit that we're kind of trying to figure out, we're going through ideas, trying to think through, okay, how do we take care of our financial needs in our region? So as we have seen, the RFAC has reported a couple of times that, you know, our contribution has taken a dip, and, you know, we're well under the line of finances. In other words, we're going through our reserves. And as Joanne had shared, we made a decision to burn through a certain amount of reserves to get through the tough times. But that can only last so long, and we've got to figure out a way to increase the contribution or lower our expenses, right? But we've got to live within our means. So that's why we're talking about this. So the question is, how do we meet the financial need of the Metro Region Church, right? The obvious things: cut back spending, ask everyone to increase their giving, and Joanne did that. You know, we've definitely cut back spending in terms of, you know, we've got trips that weren't taken to some of the conferences that some of us would normally go. We didn't go. We've got some expenses that we're just not incurring. We don't have budgets for specialty items and we're running a pretty tight budget. And so we've cut back even to the point of cutting salaries, which is particularly challenging, and several of us have taken salary cuts. But frankly, it's not enough. We need to find other ways to balance our budget. Of course, everyone increased giving. Joanna's mentioned that. Last fall, I don't know if you noticed, but when Joanne was sharing the chart, the fall, the contribution went up again. And then in January, it started dipping again. That jump went up when we talked about it, and we asked everybody to give $5 more. And that was a good jump. Well, evidently, not everybody's still giving $5 more. And so the call has gone out again. If we could do that, if you can afford to give $5 more to the kingdom of God, please do so. And many of us have. And that little amount of money actually makes a huge difference when you multiply it by all the members. So that is definitely one way that helps us. Reducing the staff is a possibility, and there is a point where that has to happen. We don't want to do that, and Michelle and I have made it very clear that if anybody in staff gets let's go, it's going to be us, because we feel very strong about the Kiainas have been serving great in Metro and doing a fantastic job. Their job needs to be secure. And we asked the Esmonds to leave their professions to serve the church and to become evangelists and women's ministry leader. We asked them to make a career shift, and we don't want to go back on that. And we do believe that they are part of the future of Metro. And so Michelle and I have said, if anybody gets cut, we get cut. But I don't think it needs necessarily to come to that. It's our hope and our prayer that we can stay here as long as possible and serve the family here. But if that's what needs to happen, then that's what needs to happen, period. And God will find a way, right? The other thing, of course, is to grow the church. And I believe that we will grow. But I am also aware that we because of everything Metro went through, there has been a time of healing and a time of getting stronger again. And I think the time will come where we're more outward focused and we're growing again. As we get healthier spiritually, our light shines brighter, and it's a magnet to people who need God, people who need Jesus. And that is beginning to happen, but it takes a little while for that to happen, but I believe it will happen. And then the last one is to generate an income, to do things that bring in money apart from contribution. And one of the biggest assets that anybody has or opportunities is if they have a building, and we have a building. And of course, we've been trying to get that building together and repaired and fixed. And that has been a much bigger project than we thought. And there have been roadblocks and challenges with the city and lack of permits. And, the city was way behind because of the pandemic. And that is just taking an extraordinarily long amount of time. And I know that we have members that are really wanting, like, come on, guys, we got to get back in our building. Trust me, we all want to be back in that building. And we've had fasting days. And God has moved, and we just had some permits approved, and now we're doing the work. And please be in prayer, because I think all of us want to get back in that building, our own building, as soon as possible. But having that building is an opportunity to make some money. We can actually generate some income from that. And the most obvious is to rent our building. And use it, let people have weddings there on Saturdays and special events. I know our building in San Diego, the Census Bureau used it and paid us for it. And sometimes the government needs things. Sometimes different organizations need to have a meeting. Just like we rent places, sometimes other people need to rent. So there's miscellaneous ways to get our name out there and get people to rent our building, and we can make good money, particularly weddings pay a lot of money for that. The other thing is fundraisers. And now that was a tricky one, like how does the church do fundraisers for the church? It's one thing for us to fundraise from the church for missions or from special collections and stuff, but it's another thing to raise funds for the church. So we've been praying and looking into different ideas. And one idea has popped up that we are very much looking into. Antelope Valley was in a similar situation in that they had financial challenges, and they came up with a solution, something to help them with their budget and help them with their building and meet their financial needs. So for the last 12 years, Antelope Valley has been running a bingo game. And the elders and deacons were involved in that, administrators, they have a director. And for 12 years, that has actually made a huge difference in their finances. So bingo is how they figured that out. And I don't know how how you react to bingo. Some of us are like, woo, yay. And some of us are like, what, really? We would do that, And so we're looking into it, right? Antelope Valley, it's been very successful for them. I didn't know how they were doing this, but they actually were actually funding the teachers' conferences. If you remember when we had Fred Gray speak and the conference on justice, Antelope Valley actually put down all the money for that. I mean, there was registration fees that paid them back, but they had the financial clout to actually help a lot of ICOC projects. There's one that was a big one that just happened with some interviews and a documentary that's being made about the history of the Jesus Revolution and our connection to that and how campus ministries were started. Antelope Valley paid for that. Why? Because of the way that their bingo has blessed them financially. And they have a very professional, sharp operation of bingo once a week. They have disciples running it. We actually had Reese go up to just look at it and check it out, and he got to play bingo and just kind of experience it and get a flavor. And there's Reese on the other side worrying about his bingo cards, trying to keep up with it. So the question, of course, that we all have, and is bingo okay? I mean, can a church do bingo? I mean, obviously Antelope Valley's doing it, and their elders are behind it, their staff's behind it. But as for me, being a Bible teacher, that was my first question. Is it okay? Is bingo okay to do in the Bible? Is there anything in the Bible that prohibits bingo? Well, obviously bingo is not in the Bible, and you're not going to find a scripture on bingo. So then the question, of course, is it gambling? Is that some form of gambling? What does the Bible say about gambling? Actually, gambling is not in the Bible either. But what about lots and chance and things like that? And interesting thing about that is lots was actually the way God would let his will be known to the people in Israel. They cast lots to find God's will. And you see them actually doing that even in the New Testament when they were trying to find a replacement for Judas. They cast lots, and that's how Matthias became an apostle. So casting lots is, in one sense, you could say it's a form of gambling, but it's actually it's a chance game that God used to influence through the Holy Spirit, right? But there's other things that we do commonly that, and if something is gambling, is that, one, is it a sin? Well, obviously, I mean, there's not in the Bible, so, but is it potential, or is it something a Christian can do? The truth is, in terms of lots and chance and things like that, Christians do it quite a bit, actually. Raffle tickets, that's a chance game. A lotto ticket, that's a chance game. I think most people would probably consider lotto a form of gambling. Fantasy sports, fantasy football or fantasy whatever. I mean, that's a chance game. It's the same thing. Card games for prizes, when, sometimes people have a poker night and have a prize, or just simply casting lots like the Israelites did. Those are all practical, normal things. The question, probably the toughest question, or the heart of it, is it biblically prohibited? Right? That's for me the first issue always. Is there anything in Scripture that would prohibit this? Because I'm not doing anything that would be biblically prohibited. And as I said, bingo's not actually in the Bible. Even gambling's not in the Bible. And so the short answer is no, it's not prohibited. And the truth is, even gambling's not prohibited, even though most of us, I think, would say, Christians really need to be careful about gambling. I mean, really careful. And I know there's lots of Christians that go to the casinos, that go play blackjack, or go play poker nights, and those are not sins. Now, for some of us that grew up in very traditional churches, that was absolutely a sin. There was no doubt about it. But I think, this is why we need to always turn to Scripture and look and see what is really a sin and what is not a sin. When we start treating our rules, like biblical rules, calling when somebody breaks our rules a sin, then we're falling into the trap of the Pharisees. We're practicing legalism, making rules that aren't really in the Bible. There isn't a rule in the Bible on this. But so what would guide us? Well, wisdom would guide us, right? Is there any example of gambling? Well, the closest would be, there's one that somebody sent me, Proverbs 1:14, where some bad guys say, cast lots with us, we will all share the loot, and they were bad guys, but it's not really gambling. It's really, they just wanted they wanted to use God's system of discernment for their own benefit. And so the issue wasn't even gambling. The issue was them trying to take the place of God. And the truth is, casting lots was actually what the Jews did. It's the custom. It's what God blessed even. So that isn't really the direct issue, but there is a caution though. And I think most of us know there's always a caution with anything that involves chance, whether it's lotto or fantasy sports or anything like that. And that caution, of course, is we've got to be careful. We don't either become addicted to it, or we don't get caught up in something because of greed. That's probably the biggest warning is don't get greedy. When people are spending all their money on gambling or all their money on lotto or then it becomes an extreme. It's just like an addiction, like alcoholism. I mean, Jesus drank wine. He didn't stop drinking wine because somebody might become an alcoholic. He still drank wine, but he taught people to not be mastered by anything, right? And that's part of being spiritually mature, is understanding what is okay and what is not okay, and knowing, even really, being mature enough to know, okay, somebody is doing something too much. So there's a caution there. We wouldn't want to be involved in something that somebody becomes addicted to or ruins their life with. And any kind of serious venture into bingo, we would have to really take precautions with that. Somebody has asked, well, what about getting money from the world, right? Is it right for the world to pay for church things? And the classic answer to that question, because it's kind of a classic question, is what happened with the Israelites. In Exodus 12:35, it says, they did just as Moses had directed them. They asked the Egyptians for things made out of silver and gold. They also asked them for clothes. The Lord had caused the Egyptians to treat the Israelites in a kind way, so the Egyptians gave them what they asked for. The Israelites took many expensive things that belonged to the Egyptians. They didn't steal it. The Egyptians gave it to them, but that was God moving on his people's behalf, moving the world. And this would be an example. Bingo would be an example of that, is collecting money from the world to help the church, to help God's people. And so the answer to that one is it right? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And God did it himself. If it was wrong, we'd have to say God sinned, God blew it. So probably the last caution or the biggest caution that someone might have, is it gambling? Well, according to California Penal Code 326.5, and I did look it up, and we have done research on it. The elders and myself and the ministry staff, we're looking into this because we don't want to do anything that would offend God in any way. But according to the California Penal Code 326.5, excludes bingo from the general statewide prohibition on gambling, as long as the games raise funds for charity. And boom, that's us. That's why churches do bingo, because it's allowed, and by the state does not treat it like gambling. Now, obviously the state doesn't provide all our definitions, but legally that's how it's viewed. The caution, probably, as I mentioned already, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money, not money, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. To me, that's probably the biggest caution in exploring this, is to make sure that none of our members, or even somebody from the community, starts getting caught up in trying to get rich and spending money they shouldn't be spending. And that would have to be watched, and that would have to be careful. But again, we don't want to jump to a legalistic stance. Like for years, I was in many of the churches I was in our fellowship, They didn't allow any drinking. Now, the problem with that is you would have to say that Jesus sinned. You'd have to, I mean, Jesus drank wine. The apostles drank wine. And I know some people say, no, it was grape juice. Let me tell you something that any wine grower, any winemaker would tell you, if you store wine, it's going to ferment. If you store grape juice, they have to do all kinds of special things to grape juice to make sure it doesn't ferment. Things they don't do now, or didn't do back then, I should say. Jesus drank wine. But he also cautioned people not to give in to sin, and so we do have to have that caution, and that is concerning to me, to the elders, to the ministry staff, that we not do anything that would cause somebody to struggle. So we made a little list of what are some of the positives and some of the possible negatives, and the positives. The positives are it would provide an important income to cover our mortgage, our building, and the building has lots of needs. I mean, Joanne shared the budget for the building. The truth is that's a bare bones budget. There's many other things the building needs that we just can't afford, and we're not doing it because we don't have the money for it. But if we had extra money, there are other things that would really help our building, and it would make the building a lot more useful. So the positives it provide, it can cover our mortgage, it can take care of the building, and even rentals. And I still hope and believe and pray that someday we can have services all over our area, in the east, in downtown, in the heart of South LA, in different places, because ultimately the church will do better if it has lots of smaller services, even better than having a big service. Big services are great for building family, for connecting everybody, especially strengthening teams and campus and singles. But overall, what's better is smaller services scattered around. But we don't have any money for that. We don't have money to rent places at this point. But we would like to have that in the future so we can spread. It provides resources for missions and community service. The Antelope Valley Church has been able to be a donor to some of the local charities to give to their community, which is fantastic, as well as help some churches out in the mission field, third world churches. It just provides great resources. It's a very shrewd method of helping other Christians and other communities too. It provides resources for preteen camps and teen camps, as well as campus interns. Those of you who are parents, it's incredibly expensive to send your kids to camp. There are some families that can only send one kid. They just can't afford it. Well, the Antelope Valley is able to help some of their parents send their kids to subsidize some of the costs and lower that cost. And that, things like that would be really wonderful to be able to do. And probably the one that's, one of the most exciting to me is it connects the church to the community. There's actually been people baptized from bingo at the Antelope Valley Church, and lots of people in the community come. It's like they don't come for Sunday morning church, but they come for the bingo, and the ministry staff's there greeting people, welcoming people, getting to know. It's given them a really solid connection in the community. I love that. I think that our church really needs to get much more connected to the community. So I love that one. The possible negatives, it could cause someone to struggle with gambling, of course, and that's what we got to watch. It could lead to addictive behavior. I put on their behavior precaution. There's precautions. There was a time in the church we didn't allow any dancing. Why? Because some people, they start dancing, they start drinking, they fall into immorality. And so because that some people could fall into sin, we just didn't allow any of it. Well, again, that's kind of a legalistic approach to it, right? That we've got to treat people like adults, and when people need to guard their hearts, and we don't want to lead anybody into sin for sure, but we can't police people either. Same thing with drinking, same thing with dancing, same thing with a number of other things. It could challenge some traditionally minded with Protestant backgrounds. There are Protestant churches that have taught that just like they've taught dancing was a sin, drinking was a sin, they've also taught that playing bingo was a sin, that it was gambling, it was a sin, and it was the devil's game and all that. And somebody who has that deep in their background or in their history or in their culture, they're going to have, they might wrestle with that. They might wrestle with that thing. I don't know, is this, and it's really not a biblical issue. It's not even really a spiritual issue as much as it's a cultural and tradition issue. Oh, just, it's like Michelle was sharing. We just taught a class for a leadership group, and Michelle was sharing how when she first started praying the Lord's Prayer, she felt really funny doing it because she'd gone to Catholic school, and she kind of just had such a negative experience with that. Well, not Catholic school, Catholic church, and that she just felt like, oh, I'm not going to do that prayer, and realize how silly that is to not do the Lord's Prayer just because you think it's Catholic, And the truth is, it's not Catholic; it's the Lord's Prayer. And there's nothing wrong with praying that prayer. In fact, it's actually a great prayer to pray. I pray it every day, multiple times. But when we have that tradition in our, it can spark a caution, a fear of, oh no, what are we doing? So we definitely have to take precautions. And we've been discussing this, that there would be policies and procedures in place to make sure that nobody gets caught up in this, and that people don't fall into sin because of this if we do this. No personal benefits for anyone. Nobody makes money off this. The church receives the money. Definitely nobody in the ministry makes money off this. No individuals make any money off this. This would be purely and solely for the church. We wouldn't accept credit cards. And some of these policies are things that Antelope Valley is telling us. This is what they've done to take precautions. No credit cards, so that nobody goes into debt playing that, it's cash only. If you don't have the money to spend this, then you shouldn't be playing. You're not going to put this on a credit card or a debit card. 18 and over, no alcohol is served there. And we have the right to refuse anybody if we feel like somebody is not being wise or not taking care of themselves or foolishly, spending their money. Then we can say, no, we'd rather you were not here. And of course, there would be security to protect the church and the people. And one of the rules, because it's a nonprofit, it has to be volunteer managed. And there, it has to be run by volunteers. And we've already begun forming a little team that's kind of investigating everything, and those are volunteers. And we're going to need, some, if we do this, we're going to need volunteers to run it all. It's all volunteer. Nobody's going to be getting paid to run it. It's all volunteers. And so, this will be a great opportunity to serve. So the question we had was, okay, so after 12 years of doing this, what is the Antelope Valley's assessment of it? How do they feel about it? They've been doing this for 12 years. And this is basically what they would say, is that it's created a great connection with the community. Love that. Solidified and strengthened the church's finances. They don't have to worry about, fixing things or coming up with the money for stuff. It's enabled the church to help many kingdom projects. I mentioned conferences, the historical project that's happening. It gives they're able to give generously to local and global charities. They have funded things with Hope Worldwide. They've had funded some of the local charities. They help fund teen and preteen camps. They hire interns for different ministries. And the fruit of this is borne fruit. They've had people baptized who come to bingo and then begin to feel safe with the Christians, then come to church and study the Bible and become Christians. And, in that sense, it's kind of a, wow, okay. So, even if one person gets saved, there's a value in it. There's an important value in it. I just love that it could connect the church to the community, gets people in our door around Christians. That I love very, very much. So we're doing our homework. We're taking precautions. Joanne Weber and Janet White, both on our RFAC, went there and to see the operation, to ask questions from Antelope Valley. Then we sent Reese on a second route to see the operational side of it. We discussed it with the Los Angeles Board of Directors, because technically we're one church, so the board of directors have to be okay with it. We discussed it with the MLC, the Ministry Leadership Group of the Los Angeles Church. Make sure everybody there's on board. We're not the only ones. There's some other regions looking into this as well. Discussed it with the Marutskis, who are the Antelope Valley leaders? How do they feel about it? Do they think it's been a positive impact? Is there anything we need to be cautious about? And they're helping us, and they have totally been generous about offering advice and guidance. They even said, if you do this, we'll send people down to help you get it all set up, teach you how to run it all, teach you how to do it all. We discussed it among our ministers and teacher and elders. We discussed it in the elders meeting. We've discussed it a couple of times, and we're not through. Just to be clear, we haven't decided, yes, we're doing this. We're still in the investigation phase. Are we leaning in this direction? Yes, because the most important thing was it biblically okay? And that's a check. That's a yes. The next one is, what are the potentials? And then another one is, the challenge of time. Do we have the volunteers? Can we do this? Do we have the people to do this? And so those questions still need to be answered. And does the church feel good about it? We don't want to do something that the church wouldn't feel good about. So we've discussed this. We've done, the biblical analysis. So we've looked at it. Several of the elders looked into it. I did a thorough biblical analysis of, is there anything that would prohibit this? So these are the steps we're taking. We're trying to dot all our I's, cross all our T's. And obviously we have, a church right up the street that's doing it, the Antelope Valley. And that's, led by a teacher in the kingdom, somebody who's definitely my senior, Greg Marutsky, and overseen with elders and ministry staff and all that. So our vision, our prayer is that if we do this, that it would strengthen the church financially, it would avoid cutbacks, staff, like Michelle and I, the missions, not having to cut back the mission support, et cetera. It would allow us to invest into the management of the building, and the building to be the best it can be, as well as in the future pay for rentals and who knows, possibly buildings in other places. It's definitely creative problem solving. I mean, I've been in the Christian 40 years and never did a bingo game. I was pretty amazed when I heard Antelope Valley was doing it, and amazed at all they've been able to do. It would allow us to keep our staff and even add interns, youth workers. We want to invest in our future and our campus, enable more kids to go to camps and events that cost money that maybe some families just can't afford. It's a great way to serve the community, to connect with the community, but to serve as well, to give to some of the local charities. It's a great way to reach out and connect to the community, get people in the community in our building, and to, Lord willing, bear fruit in the community. So these are the things we're praying about. And obviously, if this could happen, which is, we already know has happened in Antelope Valley, there's no reason it wouldn't happen here. That would be fantastic. And we want to make sure the church feels good about. There isn't, half the church is like, nah, we're not doing that. If somebody, for whatever reason, feels like, oh no, I think that would just be wrong, definitely tell us. We really want to feel good about. We want everybody to feel good about this, and I think it could be a very creative, shrewd way to meet the needs that we have. We have elders, we have shepherds, we have evangelists and women's ministry leaders and ministers and teachers. We got all of it. We got a full deck here to talk to anybody here. If you have questions about it, like, well, what about this, or what about that, or I heard this, or then feel free to talk to anybody about it. We're forming a team right now that is being led by Jacob Esperanto, to looking into all the details of how to make this happen. The elders and the ministers have been continually praying and talking about this. We still have, more things to investigate before we make a final decision. Before the elders and evangelists make a final decision, we still got a few more things to check out and make sure. So any questions, doubts, fears, anything, concerns, just please feel free to talk to any of us. We've got Doug and Joanne, Darius and Suzanne, Edgar, Don, Jacob, Susan, T and Tessa, Gabrielle and Letty, Bobby and Renita, myself and Michelle, Reese and Grace, James, Latanya, Casey, Michelle. These are the ministry staff, the biblical church leadership, team here leading our region. So feel free to talk to any of them. So that's basically it. We're trying to be shrewd, we're trying to be creative, and we definitely want to stay in the biblical realm and doing God's will. You know, obviously God loves a shrewd manager. And so we're trying to be shrewd and trying to be creative, and find ways to strengthen the church financially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Doug. He's got some comments that he wants to share with all of us. I'm going to stop my sharing. And if we can bring Doug on, that would be fantastic.